Let's go.
Let's go. Oh,
Do you want to?
sorry. I'll let you.
Next one.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Let's say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever.
Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
I don't have razor juice.
I have nothing to prove to you.
When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taika Waititi's Dad's on Tour. No, wait. No, we're definitely Citizen Dame, but we are going to be talking about everything that we love about Taika Waititi. I am Lauren Humphreys-Brooks, and with me, as always, is Karen Peterson. Hello, Karen.
Hello. I love Taika Waititi.
I know you do.
I just wasn't sure if people have gotten that memo because I
don't-
don't talk about it enough.
It's not like you have his voice saying your name at the beginning of this entire podcast.
That's still one of my favorite things that's ever happened during the run of this show, and no matter how many times I change the intro, that is never going away.
I don't blame you, honestly.
Unless there's only one person that could usurp that position.
Yeah,
I don't think that will ever happen, but that's the only way that would ever change.
It might. You never know. You never know. You could just
I'm pretty sure a certain major church has me on a list, so I don't think it'll happen.
Oh dear. Well, yeah. So today we're going to talk about a couple of different things, but we're going to start off talking about Our Flag Means Death. Before we get into that, I just want to really briefly address the fact that Twitter was sold to Elon Musk. Of course, one of the things that we do on Citizen Name is that we're very on Twitter. In fact, it's one of the ones that we use for our major social media. We're still on Twitter for the time being. Of course, as things change, that might change. So, please, we're going to, post links to our Instagram, our Letterboxd, et cetera. There are other ways to listen to us and to get in touch with us. So please, if you do not already follow us on those places, please do, because I don't know what's going to happen with Twitter. There's a part of me that is like, is this actually going to change anything? I mean, it could change nothing. It could change a lot, or it could never even happen because Elon Musk is an idiot.
Right, yeah. He's got a history of not following through with things. So who knows? This transition might not ever even occur, and I don't know. We'll see, but yeah, we're preparing for all possibilities.
Yes. So definitely give us a follow on other social media, and check us out if the primary place that you get us from is from Twitter.
Yeah.
So all right, let's talk about Our Flag Means Death. Now, I will say right off the bat, I've not been able to watch the entire series. I tried, but I finally was just like, I can't watch anymore. So I have not seen all of the episodes, but I have seen Blackbeard and everything. It is such a good show. First of all, within the first episode, I was like, I might be in love with all of these characters.
Yes.
In different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But so Our Flag Means Death is the story, I guess, of Stede Bonnet, who is a pirate in the, whatever that would be, 18th century.
Yes. He was a real person who actually existed.
Yeah, which I was amazed by. I thought that they had made up a pirate, and then I actually looked him up, and I was like, oh, this is a real dude. Okay.
He was known as the gentleman pirate.
But this is obviously a major fictionalization of that, and it's about him and his crew and him learning how to be a pirate. And
he did, because he was he was a wealthy landowner in Barbados. His family was from Britain, but they had a ton, he basically had a plantation in Barbados, and he decided, I don't want to be a rich society man. I want to be a pirate. So he had a Spanish galleon commissioned and had it outfitted as a pirate ship and went on the high seas. So he was a pirate of the Caribbean, yeah.
I love, well, and I guess I was reading up on him, and I guess that he actually appears in one of my favorite Tim Powers books, which is on Stranger Tides, which the Pirates of the Caribbean, one of the films is based on this book, but the film has very, very little to do with the book itself. The book is fantastic. It's like this mixing of fantasy and real pirate history, and it's a lot of fun. But I had completely forgotten he does show up as a character in that, as does Blackbeard.
That's awesome. I gotta read that now.
It's really good. I really recommend it. It's a great kind of pirate adventure / fantasy novel. Nice. So there's like magic and the Fountain of Youth and things like that, in addition to pirates.
Awesome.
But so our flag means death is unique in a lot of ways. Not just the fact that, it is definitely kind of building off of this cultural adoration of pirates and everything, but it really goes hard on the queer aspects of piracy. And this is historically supported. Like there were pirates who would basically enter into marriage contracts with each other, same-sex pirates, and basically agree that, they would share their money, they would share their wealth. And this was supposed to be a solely economic kind of arrangement where, if one dies, the other one gets his stuff, that kind of thing. But there's pretty good evidence, like I wish I could remember their names, but there were two pirates who actually settled down next to each other. They bought like neighboring houses, and they were in one of these marriage contracts. So there is a like history of piracy as being very much the place for queer people, for sexualities that did not fit into the very, very limited space of obviously the 18th century. Well, at the same time, things like, sodomy was illegal, literally. But when you're a pirate, it doesn't really matter. You're just like, well, I'm going to be hung for all kinds of things anyway.
Right.
So, but it's interesting. And I think that the Pirates of the Caribbean definitely, but Pirates of the Caribbean sort of begins to do this, but doesn't really go that hard on the inherent queerness of pirates. All of the relationships at the end of the day are heterosexual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on? You've seen more of Our Flag Means Death than I have.
I've seen the whole season.
So what are your thoughts on this?
It is absolutely perfect. I want to tell you, I wish that you had finished it, because I would love to just really dive in and talk about so much more of what happens, but because it goes on quite a roller coaster of a journey, and I love it. And we don't get shows like this anymore, or maybe ever. And I agree with you. I love every character that's on it. I think they all get their opportunities to shine at different moments throughout the first season, and you get to really understand who they are as people. And what I love particularly about Steed Bonnet, and of course, yes, it's highly fictionalized, but what I love about Steed and his outlook on his adventure in this show, this version of him, is like he pays his crew a salary, and so he doesn't necessarily have the best people, but he has people who are just building like this little family on this ship, and they care about each other. And there's a non-binary character. There's definitely a lot of gay romance happening everywhere. And it's so nice to see this just organically happen on a show that is also just very funny. And then it's just kooky. It's a goofy show, but it all works so well, and it works so well because you just have such an amazing cast that are completely committed to just having a good time and playing in this world.
Well, and one of the things that I really like about it so far, and then obviously,
how far have you gotten?
I'm about a little bit over halfway through, so I think I'm on episode 6.
Have you gotten to the Spanish Jackie stuff?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Yeah. I enjoy Spanish Jackie a great deal, not least because it's Leslie Jones. I mean,
yeah.
she, yeah. she's fantastic. But I think that that's one of the things actually that, you know, all the pirate tropes in general let people explore, is that they are outlaws, right? They're outside of regular society. So they kind of form their own society, but it means that there's a lot more acceptance or understanding, or kind of like, oh, okay, sure, whatever, of different sexualities, different gender identities, ways of dressing, skin color, you know, all of that stuff. I loved the I think it's the second episode where they wind up on the island. Mm-hmm. And all of the white guys get like caught and imprisoned, and the people with darker skin get sort of treated just like, oh, I have this wonderful mixture of rum and pineapple and coconut. It's really good. It's just like, oh yeah, you know, why don't we get a drink? Just like, well, because you're white people.
Yep.
And they don't trust white people for good reason.
Yep, exactly.
But I like that it's a great world to play in, because it is something that kind of exists outside of that society while also, you know, being a part of it at the same time. So you can make those kinds of jokes. You can show this like much more interesting interaction between people. And you know, and it's not 100% historically accurate, but it is accurate in terms of the tropes that we have about pirates.
Yeah.
And who pirates are.
Right. One of the other things that I really like about just the production of it is that it feels so much like you're watching a play, and they just get to interact with the sets and with each other in a way that you don't normally see on TV. And a little self-promotion here. I actually got to interview Ra Vincent, who's the production designer, and that is in Variety this week. And I'm really excited about it. This is the second time I've ever written something for Variety, and the first time was What We Do in the Shadows. So I think I have kind of a theme going with them. But anyway, but yeah, so this is something that Ra Vincent and I talked about, was that they very intentionally wanted it to feel like just this extra layer of theatricality, which is why they constructed the sets the way they did. So a lot of times in TV sets or movie sets, there's so much of what you see in the background that there might be a book on a table or something. The characters will never interact with it. But in this, they created, like, they have the rigging and all this stuff so that it's just open form. Like, the actors can just go through, and like doors actually lead to places, and like everything moves and everything is designed intentionally so that they can just play around with it and make it just fit whatever they're doing in any given moment. And I love that. And I feel like that really does add this extra sense of whimsy to the show, and also just not a realness, but I think it just really makes it feel just more playful and fun too.
And you feel like that the characters are inhabiting this world, and it's not a 100% realistic world,
right?
In the sense that, you know, this is exactly what it was like in the 18th century on a pirate ship, right? But they are definitely a part of it. They're able, like you say, they're able to play with it. No, I read your article. I think that it's a fabulous article. You should definitely advertise it. But yeah, it's interesting because that's one of the things that we often don't notice necessarily, especially not in the first watch of something, and especially not when it comes to television shows. Mm-hmm. We talk about it a lot more when it comes to movies, but just the mise en scène, the creation of the sets, the way that the actors interact or don't interact, with the set pieces, and how that kind of creates an atmosphere for the show, partially because we don't notice it that much unless it's really glaring, and it's like, you know, so obvious. So we talk about, you know, CGI and things like that, but other than that, you know, if it does its job and it feels like organic to the show, we don't tend to talk about it that much.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I'm so excited for you to see the rest of this season.
I was trying. I watched like multiple episodes yesterday, okay. and then I was just like, I don't want to watch any more pirates right now.
You need to give yourself time to enjoy it. That's the thing, because the last 2 episodes, they're a lot, and in the best way possible, and you want to just be able to savor them.
Yeah, I admit that I'm also not one of those people who tends to binge shows because I like that. I like that sort of, oh, I'm really looking forward to watching it this afternoon or this evening. Oh, I get to put this on for a little while. And then when I get to the end, I'm like, oh, why is there not more? Give me more.
Yeah, exactly. But that's one of the things I really like about HBO and HBO Max is that they're still committed to the once a week episode release schedule. They'll usually, most of their shows, especially their new ones, they'll maybe drop the first 2 or sometimes 3 episodes at once, but then after that it's weekly. And I like that because it does give you time to savor it. I'm not that I'm rooting for Netflix to fail because I love a lot of things about Netflix, but I think that one of the things that's unfortunate in their strategy is that it's really gotten us used to binging. And for a show that's not still on the air, that's fine. There's so much information out there or whatever. It's fun to just like dive into a show. But for something that's new, you want to give people the chance to talk about it and discover it together. And so I like these weekly releases.
Yes, and I agree with you. So it's funny because, talking about Netflix and the different strategies that different streamers are using for their episodic shows, right? That we're moving back closer and closer to, regular television, basically.
Right.
As numerous people pointed out, it's just like the streamers are inventing TV as we speak. And it is, I mean, that's true. Absolutely.
Yeah. But one thing that, sorry.
No, I was going to say the difference being that I do not have to pay an arm and a leg for a bunch of shows that I do not watch.
That is true. And also another difference is that a show like Our Flag Means Death probably wouldn't, well, it definitely wouldn't be on one of the regular networks. It would never be on ABC. But it also, I don't know that even, FX or Comedy Central or shows like that would give it a shot either. So that's one thing about the streamers too, is like these kinds of shows that really are pushing new boundaries and really trying exciting new things. They live on streamers because the streamers are willing to invest in them.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I liked about this. There isn't a kind of tiptoeing around the issue. There's no queer baiting going on, really. It's all very kind of out there, and it's not like overtly sexual or anything like that. But there isn't that sense of like, we're going to have to look into the subtext. It's just like, no, I've talked about it before. I like the fact that we're getting more text. That we're getting shows and films that are actually being like, we're going to engage with the reality of people's experiences instead of kind of pretending that they're there, but also that they don't exist, right, at the same time. And which is really where we should be at in 2022. Let's face it. But so one of the things we wanted to talk about when it comes to Our Flag Means Death in relationship to the way that other sitcoms in particular have kind of developed romances. And one of the things that is the big one when you develop a romance is using the will they, won't they trope. So those characters that kind of go back and forth, that they're interested in each other, one has a crush on the other. And it's like, and there are a lot of shows that are based on that dynamic between usually male and female characters.
Yeah.
But that's been vanishing more and more, especially over the last couple of years, basically. So Karen, you wanted to talk a little bit about this. So I'm going to let you go and then we can have a further discussion.
Yeah, I think there's two things at play. I think that it's not happening as much anymore. And I think there's probably some different reasons why. And I think when it does happen, it's become kind of clumsy and uninteresting. Like they reveal it too soon or whatever. One example that I have is the show Castle. I don't know if you ever watched that.
No, that was one I never.
Yeah, I mean, it's a procedural TV, detective show, but Nathan Fillion plays this detective story, like a novelist, and he ends up doing sort of like a ride along with the NYPD with a detective, and anyway, he ends up becoming kind of like a part of their team, like a civilian investigator with them. And that's the setup of the show. It's very silly. It wouldn't happen. It doesn't make any sense, but it's fun. And it's just got this kind of lightheartedness to the show. Well, but one of the things that happens is that his character, Rick, immediately, episode 1, is just like in love with Kate, who is the main lead investigator that he's working with. And so for a while, they kind of are doing this will they, won't they. You can tell she has a crush on him too. But then it's very, very quickly they get together. Like within the first couple of seasons, they get together and then they get married. And the show still goes for several years. And they're like, we don't know, like the creators, like the people behind the scenes, they just didn't really know what to do with them once these two characters got married, because that sexual tension was gone. That element of flirting and romance and buildup, it disappeared. So then they had this whole thing where they had her go off and take a job with the FBI, and then she was in this case where she had to pretend that she wanted to divorce. It was just so weird, and it was just like, this isn't cute and fun anymore. I just want the romance part of this, So I feel like there's a lot of shows that are just jumping too fast to put characters together, and then they take all the fun out of it.
Well, and it's one of the issues with this trope, right?
Yeah.
Is that, and some of it is also about the intelligence of the writers. I hate to say it, but sort of this idea that we're going to rely on this sexual tension between the characters in order to keep the show going.
Yeah,
and they don't know what to do, because at some point you have to give the audience a payoff with the will they, won't they thing. They either have to or they don't, right? Mm-hmm. And most of the time they do. So one of my favorites that they actually managed to string out for quite a long time, partially because they were not the main characters of the show, but were Niles and Daphne on Frasier.
Yeah.
But after a while, even that, they're pushing and pulling so much. They're just like, are they ever going to get together? Right. And they do. And actually it's great and everything, but almost immediately the characters lose their energy. They get married, they have a kid, and it's like, okay, why did they lose that energy? They could still be the same people, just be in a relationship. And I think that that's where it comes to the writers and the showrunners not really knowing what to do with the characters after that, because so much of their dynamic is based on this, I'm attracted to you, you're attracted to me, but we're not actually going to do anything about it. Whereas something like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is another one of my favorites, is that Jake and Amy get together fairly early. They start dating, and they date for a while, and they have like issues about their the way that they choose to live, things like that. But their dynamic doesn't actually change that much. They still kind of tease each other. They're sarcastic with each other. They give each other shit, and granted, this was not a show that went on for, 10, 11 or 12 seasons. And it's there are other reasons why it's good that didn't happen. But their romantic relationship didn't actually interfere in their dynamic. They still had this competition going. They still had this kind of, she's annoyed with how like frivolous he is. He's annoyed with how uptight she is. But then after a while, one of the things that made them really good is that he like leaned into the fact that she was so uptight. He was just like, this is your superpower. Like, you are so good at this. Now you need to use this now. And she never tries to change him. She never is just like, oh, now I'm going to take care of the man baby. He grows up in his own way, and she loves him for that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's where some of the issue with the will they, won't they trope comes out of, is that it's not the trope itself, but that when you have that sexual tension and that is the basis of the characters' relationships, and you sort of take that away, you have to have someplace to go with that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's where a lot of shows falter, is they spend so much energy building up that relationship that they at some point forget about the rest of the show that they've been making, and then that becomes the focus. Like, that was a problem we were just talking before we started recording, Northern Exposure was such a fun show. Joel Fleischman was such a whiny baby idiot, and that was actually part of why I enjoyed it, was watching this whiny baby live in this crazy town where just lots of goofy stuff happened. But he and Maggie, they kind of have that back and forth, and it's not until I think the 4th season that they finally get together. But then it was like they just didn't know what to do with the show after that, because they forgot to make it about this town and these people. They just focused on Joel and Maggie, and then it just didn't work as well after that. And then they had this weird thing where then he ends up leaving. So it was like, again, they were trying to kind of bring it back around, but it was just like, no, once you've already committed to putting your two characters together that the audience has been rooting for, you either need to take the show in a different direction or you just need to end it.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, actually, those shows, they're hurt the most when they just keep on going.
Yeah.
And it becomes this like, okay, well, now we have to introduce new drama somehow. And it's like, yeah, but we don't need new drama, right? Just let them be in a relationship and have all of the issues that a relationship can have, right? But not like we're going to break up, we're going to get back together, we're going to break up. And of course, the one that we also mentioned was Friends, which you pointed out is kind of the beginning of the decline of this trope.
Yeah. Because that show did run for so long. And I mean, to their credit, Ross and Rachel do not get together like for good, for real, until the very last episode after 10 seasons. But it was like the whole first season was the two of them just kind of, having this, well, Ross more than her, having this kind of flirty thing happening. And then in season 2, they get together. And it's like, at this point, we didn't know that the show was going to last for 8 more years. But it very quickly became something where they obviously needed to do something different. And the show would not have worked at all, and it wouldn't have lasted if they had kept them together. So they have them break up. But then it was like every time that they were starting to kind of the show was starting to kind of run out of energy, or they needed to mix things up, it would be like, oh, Ross and Rachel slept together and now they have a baby, things like that. And so it was like, I mean, I enjoy the heck out of Friends. I still watch the reruns. It's still a funny show to me. But I think this is one where, as much as I enjoyed the fact that they finally got together, but the show ended right then, I think that it was really frustrating along the way having these times where they would end up just kind of like back together but not really. And it never, I don't know. It always felt like it was a plot device. It never felt like it was really organic and natural for them in the end. It felt like, well, of course they have to end up together because there's been all this history.
Yeah, and I do think that part of that was because they kind of gave us the payoff, as it were, them getting together initially.
Yeah.
So early on that that tension was kind of dissipated. And so the tension stopped being, because basically the tension was he had a crush on her.
Right.
Right. And then he meets her again, and she's kind of completely oblivious to this. So
he was
that's
her friend's older brother.
Yeah. And so that relationship, that romance, right, was something that he just kind of, he felt, right, but she didn't, rather than spending a lot of time letting her begin to see him as a potential romantic prospect. They just almost immediately jumped into, and now they're in a relationship. It's like, oh, okay, so you have nowhere else to go with the relationship between these two characters, because they've stopped being friends necessarily, and they've become lovers, right? They've become boyfriend and girlfriend. And so that is always going to be a part of their dynamic, even if, and then they go back to being friends, and then he gets married, and there's like all of this stuff that goes back and forth. And it does feel like we've got to keep on ramping up the drama.
Yeah.
Because we don't have anything else to do with these two.
Right. Well, and I think they actually did do something really interesting when they had them get together early and then break up, and what dynamic that does to the friend group. I think that was actually a pretty cool thing to explore. Could have gone on a little longer, honestly. But yeah, so it's like, then at one point they're in Vegas and they're both drunk and they just get married, and then he doesn't want to divorce her because he doesn't want to be the guy who's been divorced 3 times, so they do that for a while, and then they have it's just, it was too much. It was like they needed to just, I think it would have felt better in the end if they had just kind of naturally started to realize, hey, we've both grown up a lot from who we were the last time we tried this, and I think that there's always been something there, and let's explore it. And I think it just would have felt, I mean, the I got off the plane thing is pretty iconic. That's a pretty great moment, but I think if it had not been interrupted over the course of the years by this weird random drunk marriage and stuff, I think it would have just, I think it would have been more exciting and more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. But it does kind of show, it sort of begins the decline of that trope being used a great deal. And I think because people kind of, and writers kind of got the point that you can't just rely on the will they, won't they kind of thing going on.
And also you don't know if you're going to have 10 years to let that pay off.
Yeah. Well, and that's always the problem with shows, right? Yeah. That's always the problem with television shows, because at a certain point, Friends was like, ubiquitous, right? It was really popular. It kept on getting renewed, et cetera. But the problem is, especially at the beginning, they don't know that they're going to have another 4 or 5 seasons to explore this dynamic. They might only have 1, or they might have none.
Right.
And so there is that, okay, how far do we want to go with this, and how much of a payoff do we want to give to this, this implied romance, or this attraction that the characters have for one another? One of the weirdest ones, and this is much earlier, is Remington Steele, which I watched in reruns, obviously, and I loved because it's young Pierce Brosnan, and he's a con artist, but then he becomes like this detective. Even though he has no idea how to be a detective, because his eventual partner is a female private investigator, and she can't get clients. So she pretends that she has this boss called Remington Steele that she does investigations for. And Brosnan kind of steps in and becomes Remington Steele. They pay off that relationship almost immediately. Like, they make out, they come close to having sex a number of times, over and over and over again. This series, I think, lasted for about 5 seasons. And it was one of the weirdest ones, because you're like, but you make out like all the time. Every other episode, you guys are like all up on each other. But then they're like, but I cannot possibly have a relationship with him. It's like, what is happening here? And so the major issue then becomes they don't have sex, right? And they don't, and throughout this entire series, they're just like, and they're like, feeling each other up in various situations. And then they're like, no, but we cannot possibly do that. Just, but okay. But this, I don't understand what the whole goal is here. It's a very bizarre dynamic, actually. And I do feel it's like one of those where the series wasn't certain how long it was actually going to have. And so they decide to introduce this romance element to it almost immediately. And then it just keeps on going. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Did you ever watch Remington Steele?
I did, but I haven't watched it in so many years. And it's like, I remember that I loved it. I remember my mom was obsessed with it. In fact, actually, this is kind of funny. In 1992, I was with a group. I was in a youth group, and we went to see Aladdin down in LA at the El Capitan Theater. And we were leaving, and we're walking through the lobby, and all of a sudden, all the moms stopped dead in their tracks. And we were like, what are you guys doing? And they were like, Remington Steele is at the concession stand.
Like it.
And there it was Pierce Brosnan, and it was great. Anyway, but
well, I mean, that launched him. That was why he got James Bond.
Yeah, it was. Well, the next year he did Mrs. Doubtfire, and then for like the younger crowd, that was kind of where everybody knew him from then. And and then James Bond happened.
Yeah, it was, but it is this very odd dynamic, and it's one of those where you're kind of like, okay, you went too far too fast, and so the question, so I don't know what the question is anymore. Like, when are they going to get together again, kind of thing, and basically the question was, when are they going to have sex? But that felt less important in a lot of ways in watching that show.
Yeah. I think another one that was kind of similar, and I think that the reason the show ultimately kind of fell apart was nothing to do with this, but like what we're talking about here, but X-Files. I think the show fell apart because it just got to be just bad and too weird, but I don't think it was because of Scully and Mulder. But for the first several seasons, there is kind of that tension, but they never really flirt with each other much or anything like that. They just become really close friends. And so it really is the audience kind of, I think, putting it on them of like, well, I want them to get together. I want them to kiss. I want this to happen, even though the characters themselves aren't really giving us that much. And then there is kind of a time where it just finally starts to happen. And then, even then, they don't really... Oh, it's been a long time since I've seen the later episodes, but they don't really jump into like, okay, well, now Scully and Mulder are together. It still becomes like this complication in their overall work. And I don't think the two of them is why that show ended up, going in weird directions, but it definitely did change the dynamic of the show when that happened.
Yeah. Well, and that's where you get into some of these conversations about shipping, basically.
Yeah.
Right. At least it used to be called shipping. I don't know if the kids call it something else now these days.
We can.
Yeah. We're old. No, but that where the fans impose a sort of an idea on the characters that might be supported, might not be supported, is kind of left ambiguous, at least on the show. And so the fans begin to invent, right, this relationship that exists that doesn't actually exist in the world of the show, and then that in turn has an effect on. I know that some of the X-Files fandom had an effect on the way that the show later developed and some of the things that happen on it. Mm-hmm. Another very good example, one of the earliest examples of shipping, is Star Trek. And this idea that there's a romance going on between Kirk and Spock, which the show does not have particularly, but it's those instances of subtext. Mm-hmm. We can read into kind of the way that they interact, their relationship, their importance to each other, all of that, and read into that a sexual attraction. Mm-hmm. One of my favorites for this, and it's one that is very near and dear to my heart, is The Avengers. Particularly Steed and Mrs. Peel. And one of the interesting things about that is that the Patrick McNee, who plays Steed, was 100% shipped them. He was like, oh no, they're together, they're having sex all the time. And Diana Rigg was like, who plays Mrs. Peel, was like, oh no, they're just really attracted to each other. And it's funny because the show doesn't, come down on it either way. There is definite indication that they are in love with each other, and that they are sleeping together and that they're in a relationship. But that's not kind of the central point of the show. And in fact, the dynamic is less will they, won't they, and more have they already. And that's like what the show kind of conceals from you. Are they together? Maybe they might be, but it's British. And so, of course, it could just be that this is how they talk to one another. But so that's another interesting dynamic that doesn't get used a lot, but again, does allow for fans then to impose their own views and interpretations on the relationships.
Right. Yeah. Well, and on the subject specifically of Spock and Kirk, I think that, it's fun to be able to have those, fan fiction can be it can be wild, but it can also just be fun because it gives you the opportunity to explore characters in ways that they weren't necessarily intended, but also that there's not necessarily hard evidence to say that it's not true. but I think also that we have a lot of situations like that throughout film and television where, because of the lack of representation of different types of relationships and especially queer ones, then we are left to try to, look for the subtext and find justifications for relationships that we would love to see happen that just weren't allowed. And that's one of the reasons why a show like Our Flag Means Death is groundbreaking, but also just such a welcome, just such a welcome entry into television history, because it does, back to what you were saying, like, it gives text to these relationships, and it gives people the opportunity to feel like they're seeing themselves in a pirate show, of all things,
Yeah, and I mean, that's one of the powers that fan fiction has had over the years, is exactly that. It's historically been used, particularly by women and particularly by queer people, to kind of give voice to the things that you're not actually getting on screen. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, like you say, so to write this relationship between Kirk and Spock, which is one of the earliest ones, and to sort of be like, oh, we're actually going to give them a queer relationship because that means something. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, now we're at the point, and I think that a lot of people have also gotten fed up with it, very rightly so, that queer baiting, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's the conversation about, like, well, is it queer baiting, or is it just like fans imposing their view on something?
Right.
Does the show really support this idea that there is this potential romance, or this romance going on between these two characters, but they're never following through on it? The great thing about Our Flag Means Death is that the queer characters are very obviously queer, like, and they're very explicitly queer. And there's
no question. By the end of the season, there's no question where everybody stands.
Yeah. And that's important. But the problem is that has been a really long time in coming.
Yeah.
One of the other shows that sort of does this, but I haven't watched the last episodes yet. And there's a question about, is this queer baiting or not? Is Grace and Frankie. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, you've got Robert and Saul, who are together, right, on that show. They're the two husbands who are basically like, by the way, we've been having a years-long romantic relationship.
We've been having an affair for 20 years.
We didn't tell you guys about it. Now we're finally going to tell you. But so their relationship is in a certain place. There are indications that kind of a relationship is what's developing between Grace and Frankie over the course of the series. And then now there's like kind of this question, is this queer baiting, or is this people that are kind of laying over their interpretations on these characters?
Right.
But it's actually moving more in a much better direction, because you are having queer couples being represented on screen. And you're also having different types of couples being represented, the importance of female friendships, and I'm not saying that just like, oh, female friendships in place of romance, but female friendships as being the most important relationship in your life, whether or not it's ultimately sexual.
Right. Yeah.
And that's something that has been developing more over the years.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, well, the final episodes of the final season of Grace and Frankie are out this weekend. I haven't watched it either. I don't know. I've had it sitting in my queue to watch because I get a lot of that stuff early. And it was like, I wanted to savor it because I don't want that show to be over. So I haven't watched it yet. But I think this weekend I finally will.
I was honestly waiting for spoilers because I want to be assured that certain things don't happen. And I think I've been assured of that. I think I have to check the spoilers again, but like I've basically been like, I don't want to watch the rest. If there's something that I think might happen, I hope it doesn't, but I want to be assured that it's not going to happen before I actually watch the show. Mm-hmm. But I think that this is also a function of sitcoms changing.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we're talking about, some of the earlier examples are sitcoms, right? One, so, Friends even, or The Big Bang Theory is another one that you think about. That sitcoms have kind of progressed beyond some of these situations, right? Some of these setups.
Yeah.
And we're now getting, is Our Flag Means Death a sitcom?
me. I don't know.
Sort of.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it is, but also not, because I think I just kind of think of sitcoms as being like in front of a live studio audience.
Yeah, more episodic, right?
Yeah.
So you've got a in this episode, Chandler and Monica go to the movies,
The one with
that
the
kind of thing.
rumor, the one with the couch or whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where you can pluck out an episode basically.
Yeah,
and,
these
and
are
watch
serialized.
it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The Office, I would say, still was a sitcom.
Yeah. The Office Superstore. There are still Brooklyn
Abbott
Nine-Nine
Elementary definitely is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of the animated shows are still sitcoms. Things like Bob's Burgers or The Great North or Family Guy or The Simpsons are all sitcoms.
Right, yeah. Oh, and on the subject of Abbott Elementary, I just wanted to say that, again, like, so I had found a couple of Will They Won't They lists, and I was just looking at them. One was from this year, and it actually had the two, I'm blanking on their names right now, but the two characters in Abbott Elementary. I'm like, you can't say this is one of the best when the show isn't even, like, the first season isn't even over. That was when this was published. I was so annoyed. Like, come on.
They're trying to find recent examples. I was looking at some of those lists. So it was just like, oh yeah, Dawson's Creek was a thing. Forgot about that.
That's right. But I
Gilmore
do love
Girls.
Abbott Elementary, and everyone should watch it. It's such a good show.
That has been on my list for a while. So I've finally gotten to Our Flag Means Death, but I need to start watching Abbott Elementary.
Yeah, you do.
Instead of reruns of Superstore.
Yeah. What We Do in the Shadows is another one that's it's a sitcom, but it also has like kind of a serialized nature to it too.
Well, and it's playing off of the original film and also things like The Office, where it's like, oh, we're going to, we have a documentary crew who's going to watch this, except they're vampires, right? That does have a will they, won't they?
It does.
What We Do in the Shadows.
It does, you're right.
And I keep on going like, come on, guys, you can do it. You can do it.
But that's one that I hope that they wait until the end, and then they have this like great payoff at the end.
Yeah.
They get to be together. Because and they're doing that effectively because keeping them apart is allowing both characters the opportunity to grow.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
They're actually growing. They're not stunted by this like desire that they're not acting on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, definitely. But that is one, like, particularly in the last season, I was like, are they? I think they might actually be. I think they're going to do this eventually. Like,
their big argument was one of the best scenes on television all year.
Yes. Obviously, we are talking about Nandor and Guillermo.
Yes, we are.
And yeah, I am looking forward to see what they do with that. I do hope, like you say, I hope that they do eventually like give a payoff for that. I hope that it isn't queer baiting. Some people have said that it might be, but it's becoming less and less subtext.
Yeah.
And the show seems to be doing that deliberately. It's not like they're just like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? It's like, no, I think that they mean to do this.
I feel like Harvey Guillen, who plays Guillermo, will not let it be queer baiting. I think that he really wants to make sure that this relationship ultimately happens, that there is a payoff for us.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
If you're listening, guys, come on.
Well, Tyke is definitely listening. Although he's not executive producing this, or he's not one of the showrunners anymore. But Jermaine, come on, buddy. Anyway.
So do you have any other examples, anything else you want to talk about in terms of like how this is a vanishing trope, right? But actually some of the things that we're talking about is that it's becoming more and more explicit. And it's also a lot of the ones that we're talking about are same-sex couples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one of the early examples that always comes to mind for me is Moonlighting with Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis. And that one is such an interesting... It's been a while since you can't find the show anywhere. So it's been a while since I've seen it. But I was reading something about it recently because, of course, everyone remembers that, like, oh, they got together and then the show fell apart. And And this is another one where it's like, that's not really why the show fell apart. So it was like about halfway through was when they finally sleep together. And that, I believe, was a season finale. And then he had gone off to film Die Hard and got injured on the set, and then she was doing something else. And so it's like the whole first half of the next season, they were not able to film any of their scenes together. And it wasn't because they hated each other, and it wasn't because the writers were trying to keep them apart. It was because logistically they just couldn't make it work. And so then it caused this whole other weird, like, okay, well, they slept together and now they're not together. And so it kind of caused this whole other problem with that show, which only lasted another like season and a half after that. But I just thought that was kind of funny. That's one of those things where the circumstances just didn't work out for them. But yeah, Moonlighting, that was a great show.
I've never watched it. I've never watched
Man,
Moonlighting.
if they finally, I wish they would just make it available for streaming. But when they finally do someday, you need to watch it.
All right, I will. Well, everyone can watch the first season of Our Flag Means Death, which is on HBO Max. Highly recommend it. It is a lot of fun, and it has already gone to places that I was like, I was not anticipating this. And a fantastic cast. I mean, everybody is on point. Everybody is funny. And it's just an incredibly entertaining show. You can also watch, and I highly recommend this as well, Taika Waititi's Dads on Tour videos on Instagram, which honestly lifted my spirits in the past week. Like, he started doing those, and I was just like, this gives me hope for humanity. Is that weird? Like, this like actually makes me feel better about the world. So this is Waititi and I think his two daughters.
Yeah. Who I don't know how old they are. I think they're like 7 and 10 or so. And they're completely unimpressed with him. And he's taken them on vacation this week, and they've gone to places like, they're just in New Zealand. So it's like we go on vacation places here in California, and I live in California, so it's not weird. But they're going to places like Hobbiton and Sam Neill's Vineyard and and all these funny like places, and he's doing this like Dad's on tour. Follow me, like and subscribe. Like just totally making fun of travel like influencers, and it's so great. But also his videos and just his interactions with his kids are hilarious too. Yes,
I really like. I think it's his younger daughter who's just like, who's just like, how dare you? I hate you. Like she is so unimpressed with everything that he is doing, and it's fantastic. It really is fun to watch. And
the one yesterday, I think it was, when they were at Sam Neill's place and they're eating the grapes. And they have these, like, Pinot grapes, and she eats one, and she's like, blah, and she's spitting it out, and he's just like, how can anybody not like these? And she just turns around, and she goes, we don't all like the same things, Dad. And he's just like, well, she got me there.
Yes, it is. He's so much fun, and is doing great things, and is lending his name to great projects as well. So
it's true.
We are very excited about this. Yes, we love you, and we do like and subscribe.
Yes, absolutely.
So to close this out, I just wanted to talk really briefly about what have we been watching. So, Karen, what have you seen this week or thought about this week that you want to recommend to people?
Well, Barry is back, season 3 of Barry, again on HBO. Love it. The serial killer, or no, not serial killer, sorry, hitman who, got bit by the acting bug and wants to be an actor. I really like the show. I think it's dark, but in a really good and interesting way. And I think if you haven't watched it, just get HBO, watch Our Flag Means Death, watch Barry. And enjoy it. And then the other thing is that I went and saw The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent again yesterday because I just love that movie so much, and I'm so happy that I did. And Lauren, I cannot wait for you to watch that movie because it will just delight your soul.
I want to watch watch it too. I honestly, I was in the city yesterday and I was walking by one of the theaters that I usually go to, back in the before times. And I was like, I could, maybe I will. So I am building myself up very slowly. Of course, now I say that there's going to be a new variant or something like that. But I'm building myself up slowly where I'm like, I could go to the movies and then it will be a matter of what I actually go to see. But yeah, I really want to see The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I am hoping that it will come out on like one of the in-home early releases, where you can rent it for like $20 or whatever, because I will pay for that. I'm saying right now, people, I will pay for that. Give it to me.
I'm pretty sure that is going to happen soon. I mean, yeah. I think that they're still doing, a lot of the studios are still doing that 45-day release window. But we're closing in on that. So
yeah. So I come on, guys, I will pay you. I'll pay you $20 to rent it on my television. Come on. Yeah. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Well, I've been watching Jim Jarmusch films for some reason. I don't know why. I got into.
You don't need a reason to watch Jim Jarmusch films. I've
just been in the mood, I guess, and so I watched Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai, which is a fantastic film starring Forrest Whitaker, who is a hitman for the mob because he feels he owes this kind of low-level mob boss his life, and so he is a proponent of samurai etiquette and samurai rules, and so he believes that he needs to serve this mob boss, and then he basically, something goes wrong with a hit and winds up sending the entire mob out after him. And in a weird and interesting and fascinating way that only I think Jim Jarmusch can kind of approximate. And then I also watched Dead Man yesterday, which I had never seen, and stars very young Johnny Depp, which made me so sad because he is such a good actor and he's so good in it and he's so interesting to watch. And so as we talked about it last week, so compelling to watch. And watching him in this, I was like, Johnny, what happened? What happened, Johnny?
I know, it's so sad.
But both fantastic films, both available on the Criterion Channel, and both really worth watching. Very different films in a lot of ways, even though they're from the same director and definitely have his peculiar mode of filmmaking that I've often thought of as he's kind of the flip side of David Lynch. I would love to see the two of them collaborate on something just for how weird it would be.
That would be very weird.
Yes, it would be, but I highly recommend both of those films. So anything else you want to mention? This is episode 199.
It is.
So we are coming on to 200 episodes, people. This is insane. We are going to try to do something fun for our 200th episode, and we'll talk about that on our various social medias. But yeah, wow, amazing.
It's crazy, but it's awesome too.
It is.
It's exciting.
So anything else you wanted to say to the people before we close this out, Karen?
Watch more movies.
As always, we need a button.
And TV.
And TV. We've been talking about a lot of TV shows, a number of which are available to stream. Some, like Moonlighting, for some reason are not. But there is, you can still watch a lot of these shows and binge watch them if you want to.
Yeah, definitely.
So definitely recommend that. So I think that will close us out for this week. As always, we want to thank our patrons, who include Adriana, Ali, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Heather, James, Kathleen, Carriata, Mason, Matt, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Robert, Steve, Sharon, Tao, and Will. Thank you so much, you guys. And we are getting together those, I know we've been saying this, but we are getting together those welcome kits that we will be sending out to you. And also
be certain for some stuff to show up in them.
Yeah, I'll also be certain that we have your US mailing address. If you know, if you haven't included that, if I don't know if you have to include that when you register for Patreon, but just be certain that we have that so that we can send you stuff.
Yes.
If you do want to join our Patreon, that's patreon.com/citizendame, you will get a welcome kit. And you will also get access to fun bonus episodes. We recently did Rebecca, and we're going to have another one for May. as well as all of the episodes early, and then hopefully some new stuff that we're trying to get up very shortly. I have been dragging my feet about it, but I am actually going to start doing things. You can also buy some things at our Zazzle store, zazzle.com/citizendamepod. And if you want to toss us a couple of dollars, we have a Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/citizendame. Our website is up and it is going through some changes. It looks much better, I think. And so we have some new stuff up there. We're going to have some reviews coming up, depending upon how things work, possibly even Tribeca stuff back when it comes up in June. So, keep an eye out for that. And that's our website, citizendamepod.com. You can get in touch with us a multitude of ways. You can send us an email, that's citizendamepod@gmail.com. We are still on Twitter at citizendamepod and on Instagram also at citizendamepod. And if you follow us on Instagram, we give Friday recommendations for new films to watch, stuff to check out. And I think that we're very smart. So you should definitely check that out. We're also on Letterboxd. That's at Citizen Dame, where we have lists, and we're going to have some more lists coming. And you could check those things out. And again, like movies that you get to watch. So you have no excuse to not watch movies. You can also get in touch with us individually. I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at LH Business. Karen, where are you?
I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Karen M. Peterson.
And that will close us out for this week. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye.
Sorry, tonight was a bit of a bust.
No, mate, you were right. Wasn't ready.
I don't know. I think you're very sophisticated.
Thank you.
Oh, it's a lovely piece of silk you have there.
Oh, this tatty old thing.
Well, sometimes the old things are the best things. May I? Look at that. You wear fine things well.
Okay.
Yep. Night.
Night.